This message comes from Capital One. Your business faces unique challenges and opportunities. That's why Capital One offers a comprehensive suite of financial services backed by the strength of a top 10 commercial bank. Visit CapitalOne.com/commercial. Member FDIC.
Hello, hello. I'm Brittany Luce, and you're listening to It's Been a Minute from NPR, a show about what's going on in culture and why it doesn't happen by accident. I gotta say, I am kind of obsessed with Mormons. And I'm not alone. The Church of Latter-day Saints has been a source of public fascination for years. There's the hit musical, The Book of Mormon, HBO's Big Love, about a Mormon fundamentalist family that practices polygamy, and, of course, former presidential candidate Mitt Romney. But lately, there's been an influx of content around a specific part of the Mormon Church. It's women. And people have been eating it up. This year, Mormon women have been everywhere. They are dominating reality TV on Hulu's The Secret Lives of Mormon Wives.
Do you think I'm a bad person for those mistakes that I did? I don't think you're a bad person. I just think that you've done a lot of bad things.
And two of the biggest tradwife influencers on TikTok are Mormon. Nara Smith.
My toddler stumbled into my room this morning asking for cereal for breakfast, so I caved and just made her some.
And Hannah Nealman, better known by her handle, Ballerina Farm.
Today we're making some Turkish eggs.
Hannah is a former Juilliard-trained dancer turned TikTok influencer, and she got insanely popular. I'm talking 10 million Instagram followers and even the stamp of approval from the Martha Stewart, all by making little bite-sized videos about how she raises her 8 kids on the prairie in Utah.
Do you guys want to go get eggs with your brothers? So every day the kids have to gather eggs.
Hannah's Ballerina Farm is like a portal to what some people imagine life was like maybe 80 years ago. Lots of kids, a strong dedication to her husband, Daniel, and making food from scratch. And I mean like from scratch.
You want to help me add the citric acid? Me? Those needs a project.
But all this fame, it's also brought controversy. In late July, the Times of London published a profile on Hannah Nealman that seemed to poke holes in her picture-perfect life. And it called into question the level of agency she had over some of her life choices.
A reporter got to do a deep dive and essentially spend time with this family and found that it was hard to get the woman, Hannah, to speak for herself. Either she was constantly being interrupted by her 8 children, which is understandable, or being spoken over by her husband, which is not going to be so understandable in today's world.
That's author and journalist Jana Reese, senior columnist at Religious News Service and author of The Next Mormons. And she's here to take us behind the curtain and understand why millions of us, Mormon or not, are tuning in to watch these women live their lives. Is it just a coincidence? Or is there something about the culture of the Mormon Church that primes them for popularity? So, Jana, you're someone who's been in the Mormon Church for over 30 years now. And you've seen Mormon mom influencers adapt to new online platforms for a long time. And I have to ask, because I'm not seeing a ton of like Muslim wife content or Hindu wife content. And I do not see evangelical wife content being this popular, truly. Is there something about Mormon culture or within the religion that makes people in the church more open to using it as a way of sharing their lives?
That is a really good question. I think that certainly it is a church that for decades has taught its members, quote, every member a missionary, unquote. That has been a mantra. And, you know, we see these missionaries who are going out into the world and they have their name tags and they're giving 1.5 to 2 years of their lives as volunteers. That's one kind of missionary work. But even ordinary people who are just living their lives and raising their kids and going to PTA meetings, they are supposed to consider themselves to be missionaries as well. And so one of the things that we could see happening 20 years ago as these blogs start taking off, these Mormon mommy blogs that you were talking about, is in the little corner, you would see discreetly, here's a link to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And it wouldn't necessarily be overt. It wouldn't be, let me tell you what I believe about Jesus Christ as Lord and Savior.
Not like outright evangelizing like one might think of.
No, it was leading through lifestyle. So I'm going to show you my happy family, and I'm going to show you that we're not perfect. We're going to show you some cracks that are really nice looking cracks, right? I mean, as cracks in the facade go, we're going to show you just a few that are not that hard to look at, just to make us seem more palatable, right? Mormons have long been instructed to keep a record of our lives. One of the previous presidents of the church, Spencer W. Kimball, actually told Latter-day Saints in the 1970s that angels in heaven would be reading their journals someday. That our lives living in this particular time and place in history would be so inspiring that even the angels of heaven would want to know, how did you conduct your life?
God bless you in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Which is really an interesting thing that maybe if you do journal, you don't want to have that be the bar. Like, that's a lot of pressure.
Oh, yeah, to think that like the saints are going to be looking over your shoulder at all your worst thoughts. I could see that being a little stressful, yeah.
Right? No, you don't want to think that. But it does elevate the act of diary keeping to a sacred degree.
You're going to receive so many spiritual promptings and guidance from the Lord in your life. It's so important to record those thoughts.
This is not just, and I went to the football game today and I saw so-and-so. This was casting your daily life in some kind of almost cosmic, holy umbrella.
Friends, welcome back to the channel. We all know one of my biggest passions in life is journaling. This can look like taking notes in my Bible, prayer journaling.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense when you think about some of the social media accounts that are dedicated to more like creative and advanced forms of journaling, like scrapbooking.
Scrapbooking in LDS culture definitely has been a thing. Digital scrapbooking has kind of supplanted the stickers and having a crop night on a Friday night kind of thing that we used to do back in the day. But the impetus of recording this, of making it beautiful, making the record itself into an artifact that can be passed down, that's still very much present. So there is a precedent for Latter-day Saints to do missionary work. There is a precedent for them to keep a record of their lives and their families for their posterity, so their descendants. And all of that, I think, feeds into the early success of Mormon women who are getting into this platform 20 years ago.
I wonder, to that point, was there a moment or a point where you felt like the Church of Latter-day Saints started to embrace the internet or embrace the popularity that some of its members were finding on the internet as like a positive?
It's such a love-hate relationship. So on the one hand, you do have this emphasis from the church that this could be a tool that is used for good things. So in 2007, one of the highest leaders of the LDS Church, M. Russell Ballard, gives a speech.
There is perhaps no other time in the history when the church has received more attention.
He said, I ask that you join the conversation by participating on the internet to share the gospel and to explain in simple and clear terms the message of the restoration.
But we cannot stand on the sidelines while others, including our critics, attempt to define what the church teaches. Most of you already know that if you have access to the internet, you can start a blog in minutes and begin sharing what you know to be true.
And so the church explicitly promoted this idea that you would write something, that you would post something to present your religion and possibly also yourself and your family in a positive light. And they got a very good response to that in 2007 with a lot of members using their own personal social media or internet presence to share the gospel. And then on the other hand, at the same time, you have the church trying to control its own narrative in a way that it's always been able to. It's always been able to write its own history and, publish its own books about that history. And suddenly on the internet, you have people saying, well, actually, Joseph Smith married a 14-year-old girl, and what do we think about that? And then in the past, many Latter-day Saints, I think, would have simply responded and said, well, that's just an anti-Mormon lie. There's no evidence for that. And then in the age of the internet, suddenly confronted with the mountain of evidence for a lot of things that people weren't necessarily taught about LDS history at church, suddenly they have to say, oh, what else don't I know about the church's own history? And so the church has not enjoyed, I think, that part of the internet, the idea that everything is available out there for better or for worse, and that it can no longer control even its own story, let alone all the other stories, right?
Coming up, we get into what the intrigue in Mormon mommy content says about the kind of country we want to live in. Stay with us.
This message comes from BetterHelp. It's important to take time to show gratitude towards others, but it's equally important to thank yourself. Life throws a lot of curveballs, and being grateful isn't always easy. Therapy can help remind you of all that you're worthy of and all that you do have. Let the gratitude flow with BetterHelp. Try at betterhelp.com/NPR today to get 10% off your first month.
Support for this podcast and the following message come from Nissan. Chief Marketing Officer Marstella Marinkovic shares how sneaker culture inspired the all-new Nissan Kicks crossover.
What's unique about the color options is the variety. We do have a two-tone option, so the roof is a different color than the body of the vehicle. The other thing that's really unique is the interior and the stitching. So it's not just the exterior color, it's also how we paired it with interior colors and the details.
Experience the all-new, reimagined Nissan Kicks for yourself at nissanusa.com today. Available features not equipped on all vehicles.
Support for this podcast and the following message come from the Southern Environmental Law Center, the South's largest environmental advocate and protector. SELC is dedicated to tackling the toughest environmental challenges by protecting our air, water, land, wildlife, and the people that live there. Learn more at southernenvironment.org.
One thing people have noted about these influencers, specifically Ballerina Farm and, model Mormon mommy Nara Smith, is that their content leans heavily into the trad wife aesthetic. For those who don't know, trad wife is shorthand for the term traditional wife, a brand of social media influencer that is all about keeping things simple, taking care of her husband and taking care of her home. Now, both of these women, Nara Smith and Ballerina Farm, have pushed back on the term trad wife. And they say they are proud of the careers that they built for themselves. But that's kind of the irony in this whole situation. So much of hashtag girl bossing was about the performance of work. You're going to see my spreadsheets. You're going to see me in the C-suite meeting. I'm constantly taking calls. And these ladies seem to lean heavily into obscuring that part of their lives. From watching their TikToks and Instagram reels, you might not know that they're running businesses.
It's fascinating, right? And it's also ironic because on the one hand, they are billing their lives as being extremely traditional, and they're also grossing hundreds of thousands of dollars as businesswomen. So it is rife with a lot of irony that their business is making themselves appear like they don't have a business.
What kind of values do you see creators like Nara and Hannah upholding, either explicitly or implicitly?
I would say that in the Ballerina Farm, it is probably more upheld as a value that women should be a certain way. I look at Nara Smith as being a bit more of a free spirit. That may simply be that I am succumbing to an algorithm that has decided that they want me to think of her as a free spirit. But one of the things that these Mormon influencers, both male and female, have going for them is that we're very used to being rejected. And I think that if you are going to have any kind of online profile, that you have to be able to thicken that skin and handle rejection and get up the next day and think, today is going to be the day when someone shares my content who is important and it will suddenly find this audience that I've been looking for.
Hi, we're the Levitts. We need your help to flex back and make this the most liked video on TikTok.
Put a Tesla right here.
Right here.
I will say that the church has emphasized a lot of values that are consistent with capitalism, a particular brand of U.S. capitalism. And that has some theological problems. It also perhaps, though, has some business advantages. And one of those is that you are going to try again. You are going to emphasize that that was just one failure. That was just one problem. Today is a new day, and I'm going to do great at this. A lot of these people seem to be very optimistic and have a certain sales orientation.
Mormons are producing the domestic lifestyle content we're discussing. But they're definitely not the only ones watching.
Right?
It can't be that y'all are the only ones watching, right? Why do you think other people are so interested in watching this content?
I think that many people are interested because there is a nostalgia factor. I think some people have the idea that a Mormon family today might be like their grandparents' families were 50 years ago. And so they're interested because they can see how different their own lives are now. You know, they're not coming from families that have 6 kids, for example. They're not coming from families where the husband goes off, Leave It to Beaver style, and the mother stays home with those kids. So part of it is, I think, a nostalgia for a lost sense of America. Now, as a historian, I'm going to stop right there and say that that particular vision of America was not actually accurate, even in the 1950s. However, the idea persists that that was a vanishing kind of family in America.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. We've seen a lot of changes, both in the past 50 years and in the past 2 or 3 years, in how people can access family planning tools. But additionally, even outside of that, it seems that many people are just across the board less interested in having children or interested in having as many children. And something that seems to pepper a lot of Mormon or Mormon adjacent content is a big, bountiful family.
Right. And we are having a national conversation right now about fertility and about how many children families should be having. And there is a movement among some quarters in the United States to get people to have more kids. And so part of the fascination, I think, is looking at families that do have more kids. And this isn't just Mormons. This is also evangelicals, even stretching back to looking at the Duggars, right? With 19 kids and counting, and then however many they wound up with, I don't know. It's not just, in that sense, Mormons. It's all families that are different from our own families. How do they feed that many people? What's it like to go to Costco and try to buy for 19 kids? We have a lot of fascination.
I wonder, you know, to your point, you brought up as a historian the fact that this kind of like fantasy of a grand old past is attracting a lot of people of various backgrounds to this content. I wonder, why do you think people are so nostalgic for this lost, bygone era that kind of didn't really even exist?
Yeah. It's a bit of a microcosm of many of the conversations that we're having right now in American society more generally about gender, certainly about families, and about what we want with our lives, the decisions that we have. I think some of the traditional wife, the trad wife interest is driven by a sense of people feeling perhaps overwhelmed by the choices that feminism has brought for them. I mean, thank God for those options. Thank God for those opportunities and choices that women have now. But you can't say that it's not complex. You can't say that it's easy to make all of those choices about family and career and whatever else it is. So we talked about how we're not having large families anymore to anything like the degree that we might have generations ago. But we're also not rural people. Most of us have no idea where our food comes from. I'm afraid I count myself in that group. I have a lot to learn. And so part of the fascination with some of these lifestyle influencers is not just the religion, and it's not just about gender, but it's also about a disappearing kind of rural America that they have idealized. And it's a rural America that is very tied with race, class, and gender.
Very interesting that is a fantasy for so many people.
Yeah, it's not for me. I do not have a rural fantasy. I'm very happy to go to the grocery store.
Jana says, to be clear. Well, Jana, thank you so much. This was a really enlightening conversation, and I really appreciate you coming on the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
That was Jana Reese. She's a senior columnist at Religious News Service and the author of The Next Mormons, How Millennials Are Changing the LDS Church. This episode of It's Been a Minute was produced by
Barton Girdwood,
Alexis Williams,
Liam McBain,
Corey Antonio Rose.
This episode was edited by
Jessica Plachek.
Engineering support came from
James Keeley.
Our executive producer is
Jasmine Romero.
Our VP of programming is
Yolanda Sanguini.
All right, that's all for this episode of It's Been a Minute from NPR. I'm Brittany Luce. Talk soon.
This message comes from NPR sponsor Shopify, the global commerce platform that helps you sell and show up exactly the way you want to. Customize your online store to your style. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/NPR.
This message comes from Oracle Cloud Infrastructure. Growing businesses can cut their cloud bill in half when moving to Oracle Cloud Infrastructure. For new U.S. customers with minimum financial commitment, offer ends December 31st, 2024. Oracle.com/NPR.
Support for NPR and the following message come from GiveWell. Over 100,000 donors have used GiveWell to donate more than $1 billion. Find out more or make a donation at GiveWell.org. Select how you heard about GiveWell by choosing podcast and enter NPR at checkout.